Good evening. It's a pleasure to welcome everybody here this evening for the university lecture, and I think everybody here knows the context in which we have these lectures twice a year, and they date back to the 1970s. The purpose is to try to hear our most distinguished and creative faculty, and we certainly have that to look forward to tonight. Just a few words, personal words, introducing Jeff. I first met Jeff's parents. That makes me sound old. I'm not that old, actually, but I happen to know them because I was in Michigan, and Jeff's father was he was the leading labor lawyer in the state of Michigan, one of the finest in the country. And his wife and Jeff's mother, wonderful, wonderful person, and I would meet them periodically, and they would talk about Jeff. And I was not as impressed as they were, but I was very impressed, and I loved the looks in their eyes as they talked about Jeff and what he was doing. And of course, it was incredibly important, incredibly engaged in the issues of the time. I then came to Columbia in 2001, 2002, and one of the first things I was involved with was recruiting Jeff to come here to Columbia. And that was a pleasure. And then we traveled together, and Jane and Sonia and I spent time in Bangladesh and in Africa and India and other places, and I really was able to see Jeff's work firsthand. And of course, enjoying and learning from Sonia was also part of that process, a physician in her own right and a great partner, substantively as well as personally. Jeff took over the Earth Institute and really made the Earth Institute. Underneath this term, the Earth Institute, are these stunning parts of the university, and I'm thinking in particular of Lamont Doherty and the great work that has happened there over the decades on study of the oceans and the Earth. And Jeff brought to that, and the Mailman School of Public Health and other parts of the university, SEAS and elsewhere, a kind of galvanizing force that he is almost uniquely capable of bringing. And was able to marry the work being done on technology and science and earth sciences and health, medicine, with policy and with implementation. And that's been a really wonderful, wonderful part of this university and a wonderful thing for the world. Jeff, more broadly, is impossible to capture in a paragraph or two. The world, of course, is incredibly complicated and seems to get more complicated by the decade. Certainly, if you look over the course of your life, you see a couple of billion people having access to human knowledge, awareness. You see the revolutions that causes. You see governments trying to respond to that, sometimes repressively, sometimes helplessly, because they're really not capable and equipped to do that. And then religion begins to fill voids, and that can be good and it can be bad and dangerous, and you see all of this playing out in a world in which we really have to figure out very, very big and important issues. And Jeff is part of that, and he has made us conscious of this, made us more and more aware of it. But there's one thing that I think is Jeff's legacy that I want to emphasize, and that is that there are millions and millions of people who live on the edge of life and who live under extraordinary conditions, adverse conditions, who perish as a result of this, who suffer as a result of this. And It's very easy, in fact, the kind of customs of the world to ignore the sense of conformity that we live in, all of us. And it's Jeff who constantly says the world need not be that way. And in so many ways, from his scholarship to his policymaking to his personal appeals to his own work, forever is saying to us and to the world, things really can be different. There are some people, George Orwell, I remember some point in my life reading all of George Orwell, and it was one powerful moment when the question was asked of him, what will it take to eliminate poverty? And I think he said, if I remember correctly, it's just when people want to end poverty. And Jeff Sachs is sort of our George Orwell of the time, and that is an enormous credit to him and a great good fortune for Columbia. John?
Good evening and welcome. My task has just been defined by my boss as impossible, that is to capture Jeff Sachs in a few paragraphs. It's my great pleasure, in any case, to introduce tonight's University lecturer, Jeffrey Sachs, Director of the Earth Institute, Quetelet Professor of Sustainable Development, and Professor of Health Policy and Management here at Columbia. This evening, he will be discussing the path to sustainable development. Jeff Sachs has done more than any other individual or institution, for that matter, to make the concept of sustainable development both a rallying cry and an integrated field of scholarly inquiry. As Jeff has written, quote, "The challenge of sustainable development, combining economic progress, social inclusion, and global environmental sustainability, is unique to our time." Jeff was born in Detroit, where his father, as Lee Bollinger has just remarked, was a respected, even revered labor lawyer, defending workers and their unions over a career that spanned decades. Jeff found a second home at Harvard, where he received his BA, MA, and PhD degrees. At the time of his departure for Columbia, he was serving as the Gallon L. Stone Professor of International Trade and the founding director of the Kennedy School's Center for International Development. It was at Harvard that Jeff began his work as policy advisor to transitional governments, first in Latin America and then in Eastern Europe. I first met Jeff in Cambridge, where he was famous not only for his work as an economist and policy advisor, but as a compellingly coherent speaker, much in demand from one end of the campus to the other. One day, however, he failed to arrive at a noontime gathering of leading intellectuals and policymakers from Bolivia, Chile, and Peru, meeting to discuss how to reduce the historic antagonisms that continued to plague relations among those countries. Fortunately, we tracked him down in his office, where we discovered that the keynote address we were expecting at lunch had not managed to get into his calendar. "Never mind," he said, "I'll be right over." In the 12 minutes it took him to cross Harvard Yard, pen and yellow pad in hand, he sketched out the 17 crucial points that formed the basis for 2 days of discussions thereafter. Amazing. Jeff joined the Columbia faculty in 2002 as director of the Columbia Earth Institute. Created in 1995, the Earth Institute now encompasses more than 30 research centers, generates more than $135 million in annual funding, and employs more than 850 research scientists, faculty in many disciplines of the social sciences and natural sciences, and staff. It includes the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, which may be the leading center for scientific research in the earth sciences anywhere in the world. Over the past decade, since Jeff's arrival, the Earth Institute has become one of the world's great centers for research on climate change and the environment, and on the multifaceted problems of economic and social development throughout the world. Together with Joseph Stiglitz, Jeff created the Sustainable Development PhD program at SEPA, the only doctoral program of its kind in the world. Collaborating with SEPA, the College and the School of Continuing Education, Jeff and his team have created degree and certificate programs that now enroll more than 700 students at Columbia. Meanwhile, Jeff has continued to play a key role as policy advisor to governments and international organizations. He served as special advisor to 2 Secretaries General of the United Nations, with Colombia Global Fellow Kofi Annan and Ban Ki-moon. With Kofi Annan, he played a crucial role in the development of the UN's Millennium Development Goals. With Ban Ki-moon, he developed and now leads the Sustainable Development Solutions Network that brings together leading thinkers and practitioners to find solutions to poverty, disease, malnutrition, and the environmental problems facing a major portion of the world's population. And he founded and directs the Millennium Villages Project that assists governments in alleviating rural poverty and underdevelopment in sub-Saharan Africa. As if this were not enough to keep him busy, he has written 3 New York Times bestsellers in the past 7 years: The End of Poverty in 2005, Commonwealth, Economics for a Crowded Planet in 2008, and The Price of Civilization in 2011, plus a 4th book on its way to bestseller status, To Move the World, JFK's Quest for Peace, published just last year. His opinion columns appear regularly in newspapers throughout the world. He has become the master at insightful sound bites on otherwise boring TV and radio talk shows. And just last month, Jeff launched a MOOC, a massive open online course via Coursera entitled The Age of Sustainable Development. Thousands of students, professionals, practitioners, and policymakers from around the world have signed up for the course, which forms part of the activities of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. Jeff's work on promoting economic growth, boosting sustainable environmental practices, and fighting hunger, disease, and poverty has taken him to more than 125 countries, representing more than 90% of the world's population. I am delighted that it has now taken him here to Low Library to address our university community. Please join me in welcoming tonight's university lecturer, Professor Jeffrey Sachs.
Thank you so much, Lee and John, for that wonderful introduction and also for this incredible honor. Thank you for reminding me that I missed that speech on my calendar. It was probably a prelude to the worst moment I had of the kind, which was when I was very graciously honored with an honorary degree at a university, and I went to sit down after they put the gown on, and the president of the university said, "Where are you going? You're supposed to give the commencement address now," which was the first I had heard of that. There were 25,000 people there. Somehow a speech got uttered out. I don't know how, but this calendar issue is a serious one. I couldn't be more thrilled and delighted to be together with you this evening. This is a room filled with colleagues and with leading scientists and leaders of this university, and it's a place that I love, a room that I love, and people that I admire profoundly. So it's really not only a fabulous occasion for me to just enjoy the company of all of you, but also a great opportunity for me to share with you some of my reflections on where we stand in this ever more complicated world right now, and an opportunity to reflect on what I've come to believe about our difficulties of solving problems and how we can do better. All of you know how much faith I put in this university and in universities in general as being at the core and the key to problem solving globally, and how much we need to solve some of the problems because they will not solve themselves. I am least of all a believer in self-organizing systems. Our systems, our world does not self-organize. It has a tendency to run off the rails and to go out of control. And I believe that universities are absolutely essential to helping to keep the world and humanity in a direction that we want. But I do believe that we have to change the way we think, the way we organize our disciplines, and the way we organize our engagement in the world. And that's what I'm going to speak about this evening. Perhaps it is fitting to note that, of course, we're in the 100th anniversary of World War I, which was the most decisive and tragic and destructive break of modern human history. And it does exemplify for me that systems do not run on their own. There is no such thing as equilibrium in economic markets. There is no such thing as balance of power in politics, because this idea of balance or equilibrium in an ever-changing world makes little sense. Our biggest interest has to be in change, in flux, and in the danger of complex systems when they are faced with this kind of change that is relentless and is at a scale that we've never experienced before, and poses challenges that we've never faced before. And that, to my mind, is why we need a new field of sustainable development, not only as an idea for the UN or as a goal, but as an intellectual approach to the world that is something new. And that's what I will try to explain briefly this evening, my preoccupations and thoughts about that. Of course, you're looking at a visualization of our global scale network. This is a map of transport links. In fact, the white lines or the bright lines on the map are the air links. The blue lines are the shipping links in the world, and the green on these maps is a visualization, GIS-based visualization of the road networks of the world. We are, of course, a tightly linked, fully integrated global system of unprecedented density of connections. We are more interconnected and, by consequence of that, living in a kind of network of interaction that we have never experienced before. It has tremendous potential for good for the humanity that is part of this network. It also poses problems that threaten us in unprecedented ways. The idea of networks or complex systems lies at the very heart of how we have to understand the world, and we're living in an age where, because of big data and new ways of analysis, network ideas and the formalization of complex systems is operating at every scale. We have the networks of the brain in what's now called the connectome, being studied at this university, where Columbia is perhaps the world's leader in the study of mind and brain. And you have on the left one of the recent visualizations of the brain connectome. We have studies at the cellular level of the metabolic networks, and here you see the metabolites in green, and if you look closely, there are red dots, which are the enzymes as part of the process, and then you have the edges of that graph as the metabolic pathways. Human systems are the same, and human physical Earth systems are also complex, dynamic systems. The challenge of sustainable development is to understand the interactions of several complex subsystems. We do not study these processes effectively. Our disciplines are generally focused on, at most, one of these subsystems at a time, or even narrow parts of them, rather than the interconnections of these subsystems. And the essence of sustainable development as an analytical field is to understand the interconnections of several complex subsystems. At the first, at the circle on the top, but I don't mean it to be on the top by any means, I would call it the techno-economic system. Mind you, this already is different from studying an economic system, which is a complex system. Economists have not been very good at connecting technology and economics in a deep way, but our economic systems are complex technological systems, and that also defines, and we understand, almost nobody understands more than a small amount of the technology which defines our age and which makes us possible to function day to day. But that techno-economic system is just one part of the complexity we face. Of course, the purpose of the Earth Institute is to connect that techno-economic system with the rest of our social and physical realities in a meaningful way. Earth systems, shown here, are the physical, geophysical and biophysical dynamics of the Earth, studied at Lamont Doherty and at many other research institutes of the Earth Institute. These are enormously complex interactions. Everybody knows how complex the climate system is to understand, how complex it is as an interacting system, and therefore complex to forecast and to predict future developments. At the very minimum of sustainable development is the interaction of that techno-economic system and the Earth's physical systems. This will be one of the defining challenges of human survival and well-being in the future, and yet it remains in the economic sphere as a very small, almost tiny subset of economic studies. And for those who study Earth systems, the techno-economic side is almost often just off to the side. So the interconnections of these highly complex systems is not well elucidated. But I want to add two other critical dynamics. One is the geopolitical system, the system of international relations, the system of multinational and multilateral rulemaking, the dynamics of power, which is changing dramatically in the world in an unprecedentedly rapid way in our very time, and what I would call the social dynamics, a very complicated an inadequate title for complicated dynamics of human relations at various scales: structure of the family, the structure of communities, human migration, changing values, culture, and what we feel to be societies under stress, not in their formal political systems necessarily, but in the human systems, the human interconnections, the collapse of trust in society, the inter-ethnic violence that is raging. And when we open the newspapers every day now, I noted today in the New York Times columns, you had Venezuela burning on the left, you had Ukraine burning in the center, and you had Syria burning on the right-hand column. And these are social dynamics as well as geopolitical, techno-economic, and earth dynamics. It is understanding these interconnected, complex, highly nonlinear, rapidly evolving systems that is at the core of the analysis that we need to make sense of the world that we're in, and yet how hard, obviously, it is to do that. Every one of these subsystems is itself enormously complex and looks like the same graph that we saw for the brain connectome or that we saw for the metabolite networking. This is simply a graph of cross-border banking relations. It has also the structure of high degree of graph connectedness, which we experienced starting September 15, 2008, when that graph became the edges of financial panic that spread throughout the world in just a few weeks. Without understanding the topology of that banking system graph, we cannot make sense of the financial risks that we face globally. So the structure is not all that different from a brain connectome, though you wonder where the brains are in this system sometimes. This is a different subsystem that we absolutely urgently need to understand. This is a one graphical representation of our U.S. energy system. It shows the primary energy sources on the left and how they interact through the industrial processes to final end users of residential and commercial buildings, industrial use, transportation, and then the non-energy petrochemical and other industry use. Obviously enormously complex in the role that it plays in the economy, but this system needs to be managed. Managed not only to keep the lights on day to day, but managed so that within 25 years, we are emitting perhaps only about 20% of the carbon dioxide that this system is now emitting. And that is an enormously complicated challenge. There is no way to face the climate change challenge without a deep understanding of this network. And yet, the integration of the economics, the finance, the energy, the physical systems is a challenge that is, of course, at the highest degree of intellectual and academic challenge, and yet is work that desperately still needs to be done. This is a different kind of network, a representation of the ethnic differentiation in Syria, which is now fueling one of the most disastrous and tragic civil wars ongoing in the world today, and understanding the complex interactions of Alawites, Levantine Christians, the Kurds, the Ismailis, the Druze, and so forth, is itself a work of tremendous complication. But I'm going to argue in a moment that we can't understand any crisis like this without understanding all of the other linkages as well. And it's the failure of integration of thinking that is so much limiting us in our capacity to address and ultimately to manage and solve many of these crises. And of course, this is one of 1,000 representations that one might have of Earth physical systems. This happens to be a map of net radiative flux for January 2014 that NASA posted just a couple of weeks ago. In the dark red areas, these are areas where insolation exceeds the radiation from the Earth back to space, and the bluer areas in the high latitudes are the areas where the insolation is less than the radiation back to space. It is simply my wanting to give you one visualization of what is the remarkably complex dynamics that need to be understood of the Earth's physical systems. I believe that the integrated understanding of these connected subsystems is vital for our well-being and is not at this stage adequately recognized. Certainly no governments around the world are organized to understand those interactions, and even our disciplinary knowledge can be a hindrance, not a help often, to an understanding of the integration across these subsystems. I think we face this problem in a way that earlier generations did not face, for the reason that we have arrived at a global scale of interconnectedness that never before existed. And it is that global full network, the fully connected graph, as a graph theorist would say, that makes our time absolutely distinct. If you think about Frederick Turner, perhaps, of the closing of the American frontier, we've had the closing of the world frontier. There's no place to run, there's no place to hide, all places are interconnected, and this is our reality of our time for the first time. And I think that some of the unique aspects that we face are, first, that our production systems are fully global. There's almost no product that is made, and certainly no product of any technological sophistication, that is not part and parcel of a multi-country production and logistics chain of remarkable complexity and depth. If the floods come to Bangkok, the global automobile industry is impacted and impeded for weeks to come because crucial components come from a few factories in one place. We have a global division of labor, of a subtlety and sophistication and breadth that is absolutely unmatched at any time in the past, and similarly with the financial system. But such complex systems, though often thought to be resilient because of their complexity, are often remarkably brittle, as the financial crisis demonstrated. Second, of course, it's our turn for our own age of scientific revolution. Since 1750, every generation has lived through a revolution of technology that has changed the world within the lifetime, a phenomenon that had never hit human society before the steam age. And every generation since the steam age has felt the wonder of the steam engine, electricity, railroads, telegraph, chemistry, the biology, public health revolutions, aviation, internal combustion engine. It's our turn. The digital revolution is, in my view, the defining breakthrough of our time. And we're still sitting on, I believe, just the very base of change that will be even far more dramatic than we can realize. Moore's Law has meant that the ability to process, store, and transmit data is now about 1 billion times greater than it was at the end of the 1950s, a billion-fold improvement. The biggest manifestation of that is a world of connected cell phones, Facebook, and being able to stream movies. We will have deeper change than that in the future, much deeper. Every scientific discipline is being rewritten fundamentally. That brain connectome, the metabolic networks, genomics, proteomics, earth sciences, eventually economics, all of it will be fundamentally rewritten by this digital revolution. Our ability to provide services in healthcare, in education, in transport, in energy, potentially all can be dramatically transformed. This is a defining feature of our time. I believe it's only at the start. It will tremendously disrupt labor markets, enterprise, sectors in a fundamental way. Artificial intelligence will be one of the greatest changes. We're already experiencing the turmoil in labor markets as a result of this, but there's a lot more to come. Potentially massively good, potentially enormously disruptive. We're in an era still of remarkable demographic change. The world now has 7.2 billion people. When Thomas Robert Malthus wrote The Principles of Population in 1798 and warned about population increase, there were 1 billion people on the planet. We've increased sevenfold. The medium variant projection of the UN holds that the world population will reach about 11 billion people by the end of the 21st century. I believe that if we stay on that variant, we're going to experience very, very profound crises. And we have choices on demography as well. But the extent of demographic change is simply shocking. Europe will go from being around 22% of the world's population in 1950 to, on that medium scenario, about 6% of the world's population in 2100. Africa will go from being about 9% of the world's population in 1950 on that medium variant to being 39% of the world's population by 2100. These are stupendous, mind-bending changes that are underway. They are altering politics, economics, migration, conflict, and these pressures are still extraordinarily powerful and still rapidly changing. We're, of course, in an age of massive geopolitical upheaval and nothing less than the change of a world order that has been in place roughly for 250 years of Western domination to a world where Asia will be the center of gravity of population and economy, and fundamental changes of politics and geopolitics that will result from that. And then finally, we are in an age of so much environmental disruption so rapidly we can't even begin to contemplate it. And we have no doubt a mindset and even minds that evolved under ages of relatively stable and benign climate and environmental conditions. Humanity always did have another place to go when it wrecked its local environment, and now there is no other place to go. There is no escape through migration, and every time there is mass migration now, and that's happening a lot in the world for environmental reasons, there's often war that follows it. People do not like new arrivals, especially arrivals that are fleeing desperation, and the problems are multiplying. One of the features of complex systems is that they display complex behavior, including the potential of abrupt change. And this is another defining element. There is nothing that means that any of these changes is gradually working out generation to the next, and I'll try to suggest that in a little bit more detail. I want to mention very quickly an illustration of this way of thinking, looking at 5 examples quickly. Let me start with Syria. Syria is in a devastating war right now that displays, in my view, the interaction of all of these elements. First, the internal stresses in Syria that emerged in 2011 with the mass demonstrations, then the crackdown, then the spiral into mass conflict, had economic underpinnings of mass youth unemployment, poverty, dislocation. But what is not so well appreciated is that Syria had just lived through 10 years of the largest drought in its modern history. And Syria's drought from 2000 to 2010 was a profound dislocator of the society and an underminer of the regime, and played a role that could have been foreseen were we more attentive to these geophysical interactions. This is also a geopolitical crisis, obviously. This war would never have killed so many, now estimated 136,000 dead, if the internal conflict had not been fed by external arms. And so our ability to amplify crises rather than tamp them down is one of the phenomena of our time. I should say, don't get me started on this. I'm very annoyed about the mistakes of policy that turned what was a repressive crackdown into a devastating war that has cost so many lives, but we played a role in that in the United States, probably inadvertently, but still a role that had harrowing consequences. And of course, this kind of crisis is fed by the sectarian divisions, the ethnic divisions that somehow in these crises suddenly become much sharper lines of communities that live together for decades and then kill together within very short periods of time, a phenomenon that we've seen in many parts of the world. I would argue, and I'm being very elliptical here, we cannot understand the Syrian conflict without understanding all of these systemic features. And one of the things that we get completely wrong in our foreign policy and in our approach to crises like this is radical oversimplification. Radical oversimplification. We want to take seriously the one thing we want to take serious in the picture. Maybe an observer says, well, this is just sectarian violence, or maybe it's Assad's despotism, or maybe it's something else. But unless one understands the interconnectedness of a phenomenon like this, you cannot understand how rapidly a crisis like this can unfold. And I should point out that these dark blotches are areas of massive drought during the last dozen years. Tunisia, Syria, Palestine, Somalia, Sudan. It's not accidental that these are all places of profound stress and violence. And we do not allow ourselves to focus on these biophysical underpinnings of conflict. And for all of you who saw Captain Phillips while I just finished my rant on this, rather than having $1 billion of fancy destroyers come to rescue Captain Phillips from that dinghy, if we had put in $100,000 into that young man's fishing village, they might have had something to eat and he might not have been off trying to hijack the ship. And by failing to understand that Somalia has been in a profound drought and demographic stress, we do a profound disservice to ourselves and, of course, to the humanity that lives in that country. Well, this drought was a massive drought, and 2 years later it exploded into massive violence. But I want to emphasize one aspect about these events: how little we understand them and how fast they can lead to disaster. And when Secretary of State Clinton was asked about the first uprising in Syria in March 2011, she said, no, it's different. He's one of the good guys. He's a reformer. We've had several visits with him. One of the mistakes the United States made was about 5 months later, the president declared Assad must go and put a geopolitical dynamic into play which never should have been put into play. And now we're 2 years later, and the violence is massive, unabated, and seemingly even beyond control. Of course, almost all of the crises we have faced in recent times have exploded like this. The 2008 financial crisis, again, has underpinnings that are not well elucidated. They are both deeper underlying structural changes, financial panic that can take place in an interconnected network, the fact that 2008 was a period of massive spiking of commodities prices exacerbated the crisis and made it hard to understand. But again, abrupt change in a complex system. Last week, the Fed minutes of the September 16th Federal Open Market Operations Committee were made public. It's a shocking document. It shows the massive shortcomings of modern macroeconomics, by the way. It is nothing less than that. These were competent individuals in the meeting, but without the tools to analyze the situation that they were sitting on. And the chief economist of the Fed said on that day, I don't think we've seen a significant change in the basic outlook. This is 2 days after Lehman went bankrupt. We're still expecting a gradual pickup in GDP growth over the next year and a little more rapid pickup in 2010. When you read these minutes, this is important to understand epistemologically, not only to laugh at or to scratch one's head, but to understand how can a field be so divorced from the underlying dynamics that were taking place at the moment. It's, the earth is shaking at a Richter of 9, and the seismologists are sitting around the table and saying, oh, someone slammed the door a little bit too hard. That's what modern macroeconomics often is. It's really a serious problem. We have another explosive problem which has led to massive unrest in dozens of cities around the world. I felt often that in my recent travels, almost every city there's been rioting, and I began to take it very personally. What was this a welcome? But it's actually happening independent of us. Around the world, youth unemployment is very high. The dynamics of inequality are very powerful. We do not understand very well yet the interconnected features of what's happening, and I would again point to these 4 circles because even the widening class divisions in the United States need to be understood in techno-economic terms, in sustainability of Earth systems. I could elaborate on that, but we are stuck because of an investment drought, in part linked to biophysical changes in our economy. We have a geopolitical crisis that underpins this, or geopolitical dynamics, I would say, and also social divisions. But the result is a rapid and massive widening of inequality of really an unprecedented character that has led to the highest degree of inequality in our country in probably ever, but in at least 1 century. And finally, I want to mention climate change, which is the biggest of all the risks that we face over a time horizon of the next 2 generations. And we've not really even begun to address this in actual on-the-ground change. And again, it's one of the most complex challenges that we face at all levels. In fact, I would say in my 30-some years in global policy work, it dwarfs every other policy problem that I've ever seen or been part of. If you think about what you need to understand well in order to be able to address a crisis like this, first, what we have is an energy system that grew up for 250 years, really since John Newcomen made a steam engine in 1712, based on fossil fuels. So the whole world economy has as its core DNA an energy system that is no longer acceptable from the point of view of Earth system dynamics. That's a big problem because it means that we need a wholesale revamp of our basic infrastructure in order to be able to address this crisis. From an Earth systems point of view, we have rapid tipping points in the climate system. We already see parts of the world where extreme events have begun to multiply, where drought frequency is higher. Certainly heat waves are increasing dramatically. High-intensity hurricanes in several ocean basins show a positive trend. One of the big problems of climate science, though, is you have to live through a lot of disasters till you get the F tests showing definitive results, and we don't want to live through all of those disasters. So the difficulty of a changing underlying Earth system is a terrible problem from both a policy and an analytical point of view. Solving this problem is a hugely complicated geopolitical problem, and it requires cooperation of China, the United States, India, Russia, the Middle East, and Europe, the kind of cooperation that has proved elusive. The vested interests involved in this issue are, of course, the most powerful interests on the planet in economic power, the oil industry and its lobbying capacity, and the social dislocations that are at stake, like a drought impacting Sudan or a drought impacting Syria, are also of profound character, but very poorly understood and poorly elucidated. I was going to show finally one fifth example of this, which I call the Agatha Christie problem of sustainable development. We have major classes of species being killed off. Pollinators, both human-managed pollinators like honeybees, natural pollinators like bumblebees, amphibian classes that are dying off in large numbers. What is stunning about this so-called sixth great extinction is that when you try to analyze what is the source of the bee colony collapse, or what is the source of the loss of amphibious species, there are so many potential culprits that it's like you're on Agatha Christie's Orient Express. You have 12 potential murderers. The truth is that they're probably all playing some role in this case, but the complexity of addressing this mass loss of biodiversity is also about as daunting as a policy challenge gets. Global trade is involved in at least half the cases of rapid drops of species abundance because global trade is pushing land use change, it's pushing over extraction, it's pushing over fishing, it's pushing over hunting and so forth. Ecosystems have tipping points, so-called Ollie effects or other kinds of nonlinear dynamics that can lead to rapid collapses or to invasive species and new pathogens arising, which is part of the bee colony collapse disorder. The international geopolitics is definitely unhelpful in this regard. The rules of the game are not written for species protection or for ecological protection. And under an enormous number of the bilateral investment treaties, companies that do great ecosystem damage are protected by these treaties against regulatory change because the treaties bar regulatory changes affecting foreign investment, so investment takes priority over the ecosystem functions. And we see all of the social dynamics of land grabs, populations disinherited from traditional land areas, and so forth as part of these dynamics. All of these quick examples are to illustrate my anxiety about the way that we approach problems like this now, and the need for a new kind of holism in our studies, our understanding, our methods of interaction and problem solving. And I believe that these are fundamental changes that are needed in a short period of time. Scale is a remarkable phenomenon. The world has changed dramatically to a global scale of unprecedented intensity. We don't have a lot of time to face that particular reality. What are the new methods that are needed? I believe transdisciplinary teams are of fundamental significance for all aspects of problem solving. The individual disciplines cannot address these problems. And so we need disciplinary knowledge but the siloed nature is a massive hindrance to clear understanding. The kind of expertise that's needed for addressing these problems, in my opinion, is a different kind of expertise from normal hypothesis testing, normal F-tests, normal statistical testing. What we really need is expertise in a more clinical kind of practice, what is in medicine called differential diagnosis, which I believe is a fundamental tool, the capacity to analyze a specific contextual crisis through a general body of knowledge. And that is by itself a particular kind of intellectual exercise. It means much more Bayesian logic than frequentist logic. It means much less reliance on classical statistical tools and much more on diagnostic tools that bring in a multiplicity of knowledge. I believe that goal-based problem solving is essential, setting goals in complex conditions, because when you need to coordinate across massive subsystems, there needs to be some orientation to help society move in a particular direction. You can't get everybody in the room, but you can help to orient society in a particular direction. I've been now 13 years the UN's advisor on the Millennium Development Goals. The mere fact of having globally agreed goals on poverty, hunger, and disease has made a difference. It has helped to organize epistemic communities, expert systems, financial arrangements, multilateral negotiations, national policy, NGO activity, simply by having a goal. And I always like to refer to President Kennedy's wise guidance on this when he was pursuing the goal of peace in 1963. And he said, by defining our goal more clearly, by making it seem more manageable and less remote, we help all people to see it, to draw hope from it, and to move irresistibly toward it. And so goal setting, I believe, is a fundamental part of problem solving. And that's not absolutely normal, to set goals and then move towards them. Clearly, the nature of the decision processes and action dynamics are also vastly more complicated because of the number of stakeholders inherently at the table, if there is a table, and therefore the need to move society in more complicated ways. The nature of our training, I believe, needs to be very different in the future. Doctors are trained in a way that I admire enormously. They follow a preceptor on the ward. They learn through clinical practice. See one, do one, teach one. It's a little frightening, but it's a good idea. Whereas in economics, for example, my own field, we don't have an apprenticeship process the same way. We don't have a training process. We don't have a clinical practice the same way. And I believe we don't train, therefore, for differential diagnosis. As all of you know who know me, I believe in the concept of reflective knowledge and engagement. I don't believe these problems can be solved analytically without engaging in the actual problem solving itself. There's no more instructive way to understand something than to wade into the muck and try to solve it. And you learn so much more about what the real forces at play are, what the understandings in society are, what the differences of opinion, interests, faith, values are that make solutions complex. And it's almost impossible to have the sense of complexity without that kind of engagement. And finally, we need sensitivity to abrupt change. We need, if I could put it this way, a sense of the tragic possibility. We need to be careful. We need to understand how things can go terribly wrong in dynamic systems. We need buffers. We need to stop playing games with the earth, with each other, with conflicts, with slogans, with short-term thinking, with the superficial ways of addressing what are extraordinarily deep and pressing problems. Well, that ain't going to happen in Washington. Not at the beginning, anyway. Especially now, because our politics really are broken. They're deeply corrupted, in my view. When election campaigns are $7 billion cycles, you can't get clear thinking. And so I do believe that the role of universities and knowledge centers working across various stakeholder groups with business, with civil society, with politicians is extraordinarily crucial. And I just want to salute my colleagues at the Earth Institute and to highlight how I feel that the Earth Institute plays a contributing role, because I do think that it is a unique initiative. Universities around the world are emulating the Earth Institute now. They're looking for guidance. They're trying to understand how they can become involved in the same challenge. I'd like to underscore that the Earth Institute is pioneering a new discipline, not only being engaged in problems, but viewing sustainable development as an intellectual discipline, as a complex systems science, as a complex systems science that integrates techno-economic, earth, geopolitical, and social subsystems. And it is understanding that interconnectedness that is key. The Earth Institute has pioneered the creation of many new teaching programs in this complex systems approach, our undergraduate major, many master's degrees, and our PhD program, of which we're enormously proud and which will celebrate the 10th anniversary in 2 days. The Earth Institute is building a complex, cutting-edge research program in complex social physical systems. It is not easy. It is not the way that grants come. It's not the way that departments hire. It's not the way that disciplines work. And that's why I feel that the value of this initiative has been extremely important, and why the tremendous leadership and support of President Bollinger and Provost John Coatsworth has been so vital to the ability of the Earth Institute to make headway on this, and colleagues across the university. And the Earth Institute has hosted 2 global-scale programs of problem solving: the UN Millennium Project, which brought together hundreds of experts around the world to look at how practical problems of AIDS control, malaria, safe pregnancy and delivery, infrastructure in impoverished regions, agronomic uplift in Africa and so forth could be addressed. And now the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which is a new effort under the auspices of UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, which the Earth Institute is enormously proud to host the Secretariat, and which aims to create a network worldwide of problem solving so that we have a chance to take these crucial challenges, understand them, and address them at all scales across the globe. I'll just close by perhaps coming back to John Kennedy. All of you who know me well know I can't resist doing that, because I think his words resonate so beautifully 50 years after his death. He said, even in his inaugural address, something that is even more pertinent for our time. He said, "For man holds in his mortal hands the ability to end all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life." He was referring to thermonuclear war as the disaster. In our time, it's perhaps our inadvertence and neglect of planet Earth itself that is the biggest single threat that we face. But we really do have that choice. We have a choice about the future. We have both the possibility to end extreme poverty by harnessing Moore's Law, by harnessing this great technical revolution that we're experiencing to address the planetary challenges. There is absolutely no excuse for not doing so, in my view. But we also have the huge potential, the human potential for being mindless, for sleepwalking into war, as we did 100 years ago, or for stoking crises through neglect or ignorance or bigotry or simple stupidity, as we're doing in many places in the world right now. Knowledge and a shared human spirit are the key to our survival, and Columbia University is a unique institution to bring those two together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff, for an inspiring lecture. You are all invited to join us for a reception afterwards. In place of a question and answer session, we will pursue the topics that Jeff has discussed informally during the reception to which you're all invited. Thank you all very much for coming, and thank you, Jeff.